Hello, it's been a busy couple of weeks for Huddersfield Town. Alex Smithies leaving the club this week. Speculation over Jacob Butterfield. They turn their attentions this weekend to an away trip to Craven Cottage, taking on Fulham. Paul Ogden, our Huddersfield Town commentator, here with me. I'm Catherine Hanna. Let's talk about the team news first of all then. Many changes expected for Fulham.
I think we're all resigned not to having Sean Scannell tomorrow, which is a real pity because he lifted people's spirits last week at home to Blackburn Rovers. But when you look back at Huddersfield Town's second half performance on Tuesday against Brighton and the way they turned the character of the game round, maybe we shouldn't be too upset. James Vaughan has suddenly come back into the picture, albeit for a limited time. It may be a slightly more defensive selection because Chris Powell tends to go that way away from home. But I don't think there'll be too many radical changes, Catherine, no.
I can just hear fans going, oh, at the word defensive formation. But I suppose away from home, though Fulham haven't really been much to write home about so far this season. So, in some ways, would it be better to go a bit more attacking and really put it to them?
At some point, Chris Powell is going to take the initiative properly. And he likes to now when he can, but his resources are limited. And still, there is an implication in his selections which suggests that if he did everything that we want him to do on the sidelines, then he fears a big deluge from certain opponents. And I hate to remind everybody, Catherine, but despite Fulham's modest table finish last season, they beat Huddersfield Town twice. And Town played quite well at Craven Cottage, but still got a Ross McCormacking 3-1 and a very, very poor performance at home at the end of the season. Fulham have got problems, and they're in transition, I think, at the moment, but they've got talent.
You mentioned James Vaughan. That's been a really interesting situation with Chairman Dean Hoyle saying that's it, at the end of the season, we're not planning to offer him a new contract. We'll hear in a moment from Chris Powell what he's had to say on that. But do you expect that to affect James Vaughan? Would you expect him to be in the side if he's fit and available?
I think he will be in the side. We asked Chris Powell this exact question around the issue of why you would pick him in these circumstances on Tuesday after the game. And Chris was commendably good-humoured about the situation. It's very unusual, but Vaughan, for his own purposes, needs to play because he needs to show the rest of the football industry now that he's still very much available after summer 2016, if indeed he stays at Huddersfield Town that long. From Chris Powell's point of view, he needs strikers who can score goals. There might be a school of thought which says that Ishmael Miller might be rested now that Vaughan's available again. The prospect of Vaughan and Wells, whatever their contractual commitments are, is a delicious one against any opponent. So Vaughan's still got a chance of playing and contributing to Huddersfield Town's season.
Well, let's hear a little bit of what Chris Powell's had to say about James Vaughan talking to us on BBC Radio Leeds this week.
He's got to think about his future and what's happening with him. And I have no doubts about that. Obviously, when he goes on the pitch, he has to do that. I mean, he's paid to play for Huddersfield Town until told differently. And he'll be fine if he's included in the 11, in the 18. I've got no qualms with James with how his attitude will be in the games, and we'll, obviously deal with any situation that will crop up with him. If people have an interest in him, now or in January, but he's contracted till the end of the season. That will continue the case until I and him are told differently.
The other player we have to talk about as well, you've mentioned, is Jacob Butterfield. He seems to be the source of much interest from elsewhere. Town so far are very much digging their heels in and saying he's not for sale. Again, the speculation doesn't appear to have affected him, certainly not from the midweek performance.
No. Jacob Butterfield, I think Huddersfield Town did a great piece of business getting him off Middlesbrough in their first place last season, Catherine. And Jacob Butterfield is already showing signs this season that he is at the top of his game, or near. Dean Hoyle, in his question and answer address to the fans at Canalside before Tuesday night's game against Brighton, won many friends who are not Huddersfield Town fans just for doing it and being so open. And one of the very many interesting things he said was the reassurance to Town fans that Jacob Butterfield is not for sale. And that's been echoing in our ears ever since then, which is great. You always prefer my honest opinion, so I'm going to give it you. I have to say that however reassured I was by Dean's words, there are certain things which even Dean Hoyle, even a man as powerful and influential as Dean Hoyle, cannot influence. And what I mean specifically by that is a footballer like Jacob Butterfield at the top of his game having the desire still to earn as much as he possibly can before his career's out. And what I perhaps privately fear is that Jacob Butterfield might still be influenced into maybe seeking a higher salary elsewhere with a club who can pay him a lot more than Huddersfield Town can. Even if he's not being advertised for sale by Huddersfield Town, as Dean Hoyle said, if it comes to the point, and perish the thought, but if it comes to the point where Jacob Butterfield, let's use the football parlance, has his head turned, and his agent begins to field offers which cannot possibly be turned away, because there will be clubs who are desperate to get into the Premier League and will pay Jacob Butterfield over the odds in this form, that's the point at which even Dean Hoyle might have to say, look, now Jacob Butterfield falls into the Jordan Rhodes and Jack Hunt category. I'm not going to try and keep a player who doesn't want to play here anymore, so we might have to sell him after all. I'm sorry to say that, but I still privately fear that, and it might even apply to other players. So I'm not completely certain that we're going to be able to enjoy Jacob Butterfield's performances for the next 5 years at Huddersfield Town. I have to say that to you right now.
Town fans, I'm sure you've got views on that, and let us know what you think. As always, a couple of ways you can get in touch with us right throughout West Yorkshire Sport on Saturday. You can send us your tweets at WYS Daily. You can text us as well, 81333, and start your text messages with WYS. So the plan, full commentary coming up of Huddersfield Town away at Fulham. All the build-up starts straight after the Leeds match on 774am and DAB Digital Radio, and then you can hear full commentary Huddersfield Town away at Fulham with me, with Oggy, with Kieran O'Regan from 3 o'clock on all BBC Radio Leeds frequencies. Join us then if you can.